Hello, and welcome to the CUBE Pod, episode 130. I'm John Furrier with Dave Vellante. SiliconANGLE Media's CUBE Pod. Dave, salute.
Good
Salute.
afternoon, John. How you doing?
Good, doing good. New York City had a turnaround in Vegas. You were out in Snowflake. I want to get into the Snowflake and Cisco Live. But the market really tanked today. I was in the building. I'm like, it must be the Knicks factor. Knicks haven't won a championship in basketball since 1973, and
The Knicks. Yeah, the
everyone in New
Knicks tanked
York's
the
going
market.
crazy. I call it the Knicks curse. So if the Knicks lose, then the market's going to crash. We'll see. They haven't been in a final, I think, since the 90s. So they're looking good. So hoop fever here in New York City, Dave.
Yeah,
So
I can believe it.
yeah.
Good for them.
It's almost like the Red Sox curse. 73 seems like, a long time ago, 57 years, Dave. So
Yeah, but
they're-
Walt and the team, they actually did some damage back then. And
yeah. So a lot on the market. I mean, the tech sector, cryptos really bottoming out. Some think the bottom may not, maybe lower. Bitcoin closed at
yeah, we hope it's
60,000.
bottoming out. It may not be bottoming out. We're gonna go back down to the 40s.
Buy, baby, buy. Buy and hold.
Catch that falling knife, as they say.
It's interesting how this is going to be weird because it's like, does the tech productivity shift to other sectors? Because we've been saying on theCUBE, I mean, we've been like banging this drum for 3 years, and since we've come to the NYSE with our new studio and the NYSE Wired brand really growing fast, technology is the market. And so I think, I read the tea leaves here, watching CNBC today on the ground, and then seeing some of their coverage. The tape is affected by other sectors. So there's the tech piece, but also the lift is moving outside of tech. And then tech took a little bit of haircut this week as Broadcom had a massive bad day yesterday. They were down like 15%. I stopped looking. I looked the other way. It's like a train wreck. And
On a decent quarter, by the way. I mean, the quarter was good. They beat. I mean, they didn't raise. That's what people were freaked out about. But quarter was still good.
that was the reason why. I mean, they basically didn't have a massive growth estimate. So, it's a little bit of a pullback. Record streaks are coming to a halt. But, the headlines on the cyclical side of the business, booming with infrastructure build out and security and ARR. You're starting to see ARR businesses developing, and you're seeing spend. And many are saying is a cyclical business. We've been covering the neo clouds and the hyperscalers. Front page Wall Street Journal, literally 28 minutes ago, Google to pay SpaceX nearly $1 billion a month in cloud computing deal. So you're starting to see the big spend, and this is affecting everybody. Cisco is up 5%. I saw Chuck Robbins on CNBC. So of course, I had a one-on-one with them in the Q&A, and I talked to Jeetu Patel one-on-one for a half hour. They're seeing growth in networking, and they don't even have their A game yet. So Cisco up 5% on Tuesday, and they have a lot more work to do. But they're pulling it together again, the product leadership. So, mega spend, the CapEx is still going strong. Google's basically raising money because they need more cash. Dave, remember Caruso said on theCUBE in Palo Alto before GTC, we need more money. It's like, I'm like, wait a
Google
minute,
hasn't done a raise since like 2003, 2004, John. I mean, wow.
So that is a signal. I mean, so this means this spending is there. Now, Jeetu Patel said in his keynote, in the Q&A, when the financial analysts were asking him questions, he says, unlike the internet bubble, there's demand. Of course, we've been saying that for years, but he's right? So, you got the build out, and it's a total arms race going on. SpaceX has obviously got XAI in that deal, and they got their big public offering, which a lot of people on the street are like, doesn't smell right in Denmark with this IPO and the NASDAQ changing the rules for liquidity and lockup. A lot of scuttlebutt around the SpaceX IPO. So, word here is that, hey, this is not very investor friendly if you're going to have Elon and all the people taking their money out super fast. There's a potential for, a bad scenario on the retail side. So a lot of people really squinting through at that big IPO. And of course, Anthropic's filed, and they said, wait, AI is going too fast. Of course, that's marketing. And then you got OpenAI right behind them. So you got SpaceX Anthropic and OpenAI going public. Okay, billions and billions of dollars in capital. Okay, um, I think SpaceX is the big one. Trying to raise a stunning $75 billion. Right, so that is just an incredible amount of capital. So the question is, does that impact the sector? So, that's been the big conversation this week on the market side, on the money side. Meanwhile, rumor is that Databricks isn't going to go public till next year anyway. So they're out there. They're staying private. I mean, again, why go public, Dave? So you got this market where you got an open IPO window. The economic reports look good, but the volatility on the ranges of stocks is off the charts. So, a lot of people here are scratching their head. Of course, I think it's really going to be the infrastructure build out will kick off the productivity gain in all sectors with AI agentic kicking in. And then physical AI is already getting a massive boost because we're seeing the robotics side of things kicking in. So, and everything's coming together. I mean, this morning I did an interview. We had a feature on Wall Street. We brought in the Tensor car. Remember the Tensor car we had at GTC? Yep. Tensor AI team, Tensor.auto, they have a full L4. They're going to start shipping in H2, and they're going to open up that market in Middle East. Of course, those buyers have millions and millions of dollars. So, clearly AI is popping. Infrastructure, physical, and then we have no clue on what the productivity is going to be. So I think it's going to be a crazy second half.
Well, the jobs numbers came out today, which set off which piled on the decline. People were expecting, I think 82,000. It came in, way, way higher. So it's like, wow, I thought AI was killing jobs, and now jobs are, growing. And so people are like, well, the Fed's not going to cut. Maybe the Fed raises. Panic! All the semiconductor stocks are getting crushed, and so I kind of think it's positive because the market was definitely getting way too greedy and overheated and irrational exuberance and all that. But Broadcom, I think it doubled its AI revenue, and stock's getting killed. So, and of course, it's dragging down everything. NVIDIA's down, and all the hot AI stocks are down. This is normal, right, John? I mean, every time you see one of these big waves, you always have these pullbacks. There are many, 5, 7, 8, even 10% pullbacks during the .com, and then it comes back and it comes back and it goes down, it comes back until it doesn't. And then it really comes back. I mean, that's kind of the very similar patterns. It's just, there's always something new here. But I'm still optimistic. You're seeing people continue to spend. They're paying for the CapEx out of their cash flow, not out of debt. I mean, the debt levels today relative to where they were in terms of paying for the CapEx relative to the late 90s, back then it was, 80% of it was, debt on the balance sheet versus today it's, much, much less, probably 50, 60%. You got the blue owl situation and you see what Oracle's doing, but for the most part, these hyperscalers are paying for it, out of the cash flow. Now it's an interesting sign that Google's taking out, doing another raise here. As I said, they haven't done it in decades. So, we're starting to see some cracks in the armor, if you will. The bubble's not popping yet. I don't think this is the beginning of the end. I think there's a little bit more of a runway here, at least a couple of years, based on what we hear from Jensen. And you saw that's the other thing. The other big news is Jensen Sunday. I guess you got the preview. I missed it, but at GTC Taipei, with new PCs, which David Floyer predicted, he said, NVIDIA is going to dominate the PC market eventually. He predicted that like a year ago. So we'll see how far they can take this. But it's all about this transition to accelerated computing, John. The transition is on.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what Jensen announced, he basically announced the production of the Vera Rubin chips, and specifically Dell was called out. And in fact, Michael Dell tweeted the new rack, and so you're going to start to see full production of Vera Rubin. That's going to accelerate. The significant announcement was basically I call it the supercomputer PC or the God box, right, for the desktop. I mean, you're going to start to see NVIDIA's Vera processor and all these capabilities come into the desktop, and ARM obviously is involved in a lot of this too, where all the AI on premises is going to explode. So I think the on premises activity, aka what the data center will look like for companies, will be a certainly hybrid. IBM bet on that; they're winning. You're seeing hybrid cloud, Red Hat, and others. So hybrid cloud, which means on the cloud and then on the premises or the data centers. It was supposed to be that the data centers were all going to move to the cloud. Not anymore, because all the activity and engagement inside these enterprises are from the people who actually work there. So the combination of the fact that the users are using this, and combined with the fact that AI is now becoming the interface for value creation. You can do things much faster, is well documented. We need to go into that, but that's clear. So now you have people also now deploying agentic capabilities, automating workflows. That's stuff that's inside the company, inside the data of the company. And that was the main premise 2 years ago when we started talking about AI factories. Was we said that the crown jewels of the company is going to be their data. IBM, did a study and said 1% of the data in these enterprises are locked down, and so that unlock, as they say, is huge. Now, when you combine agentic and these new horizontal data layers emerging, you now have a feeding frenzy of user experience shift. That's happened. Okay, the models don't crawl the enterprise. Everyone who's listening, watching knows OpenAI. They know Claude. They know Gemini. They crawl the web. They don't crawl the enterprise unless the enterprise users are putting stuff in there like everybody is doing, right? So you have now this unlock perfect storm. You have the adoption of users, and you have the crown jewels, the data of the company, and they're going to buy servers, aka AI factory racks. And so that's why Dell is kicking ass right now. And that's why HPE is getting in the game. That's why everybody's getting in the game. So what's going to happen next, Dave, is that not everyone's going to have the facilities to basically put in these monster NVIDIA racks. So what's going to happen is they're going to go back to the old school data center thinking, or back in the even old days of digital PBXs and put stuff in the telephone closet. So I think you're going to see this PC supercomputer that NVIDIA and Dell and others are going to come out fast with, and it's going to be the supercomputer on the desk, and that's going to be a great offload, and that's going to turbocharge data centers on-prem. And then they're going to say, well, we don't have the size. And they go, great, we'll use AMD, screw NVIDIA. Or you might not say screw NVIDIA, but they'll say, that's too expensive. I'll use AMD, Intel, and FPGA company Efinix that we've been tracking here. They have an unbelievable FP&A platform, the PGA platform, so you can get the benefits in a smaller form factor to run these like fleets of agents inside the company. And then you go to the cloud, then you go to the big AI factory. So this is distributed computing, Dave. So I think this is now new, and I think coding unlocked or broke the barrier. The floodgates are now open because coding in the enterprise became such an obvious thing of value. Then it's like, okay, if we can code, why don't we get agents doing coding? Great, they're doing that. Why don't we get agents to help us do our job? That's starting to happen. So I think this is going to bring together the decade of deep coverage that you've been doing, I've been doing with Databricks, Snowflake, the data plane, semantic layer. Well, we've called it, 10 different things over the past decade. So we are going to see a massive data integration, data harmonization, systems of intelligence revolution. And I think it's just the beginning. And I think, connecting the dots with Snowflake and Cisco, you got to network the data and you got to get access to the system. So I think you're going to see Databricks, Snowflake, Cisco, Arista, Juniper, all going to be popping. So I think the enterprise is going to be completely flipped upside down in terms of what IT used to be. And now it's IT everywhere. You're going to start to see the rise of new personas. It's a whole new re-architecture. It's happening as we speak. It's unfolding in front of our eyes.
So so to pick up on some of the things, a lot to unpack there. But you mentioned the dark data. I think I first heard that with Ginny Rometty in the IBM study. But it's not just about the dark data, in my view. It's about this. It's about the tacit knowledge, the sort of, the people call it sometimes tribal knowledge. So the big story is really the opportunity in software is converging around, it's that system of intelligence that we talked about it, but it's becoming clear that this new we call it the system of engagement, not like the social media system of engagement, but a new intelligent client, like the Coworks and the Codexes, and some of the new BI tools. We saw this at Snowflake this week. They renamed Snowflake Intelligence, which was text to SQL, talk to your data. They renamed it Snowflake Cowork. Everybody's using that term, and then that's for business users. Then they have Coco, which was Cortex Code, so that's their sort of their coding agent, and it's all about how to bring Jensen's notion into it, extreme co-design. So that system of engagement, that front end needs to connect to a back end to make it useful. So the new client is this agent-based system of engagement. You got not only Snowflake with its Cowork and Coco, you got Databricks has Genie. Mike, you got Microsoft Copilot. They made a bunch of announcements this week at Ignite. You got Google with Gemini Enterprise. Obviously, you have Claude Cowork, which is the hottest thing in the world right now. You got ChatGPT with Codex. But that client they're not going to deliver those type of business outcomes that you talked about. Again, not just about the data. It's about that tribal knowledge, that tacit knowledge. It needs that back end, what you were just talking about, the harmonization, the context, the ontology. That's what we call the system of intelligence. And that ultimately represents this model of the enterprise. And I think the thing that's becoming more clear, and it's interesting what you said, you're right. We started out like the fifth data platform, or the sixth, then we call it the sixth data platform. And then we evolved it, the new AI software stack. And it's the heart of that is that system of intelligence. And you can't build one that back end without the front end, because it's a closed loop where the system of intelligence and the agents, they learn from the reasoning traces of the human, and then they feed that back to the system of engagement and the Coworks and the end user interactions. And that loop requires, whether it's Jensen's extreme co-design or you can use Clay Christensen's integrated innovation, that's what's going to determine who is basically owning that sort of new software stack versus who's feeding it. And the interesting thing, John, is the data platforms want to be there. Obviously, Snowflake, which I'll make some comments about how they've changed in the last 2 or 3 years, like completely, thanks to Sridhar. But Databricks is there. You got the LLMs, which are basically attacking all the SaaS players, who they also want to be there. The ServiceNows and Salesforces and Workdays and Oracles and SAPs, they all want to participate. So that's the real battle that's going on here. Who's going to own the front end and the back end? And both of those are changing dramatically, both becoming more intelligent. But what people aren't connecting is they've got to work together with extreme co-design.
Yeah, I mean, co-design is critical. I mean, if you look at the systems of intelligence that you guys have been doing research on, that's based upon the fact that these systems need to talk to other systems or subsystems. So this idea of co-design is not just an NVIDIA concept, although they pioneered the idea because they're in the supply chain and they have to work with the suppliers to build and design their chips, which is, as you know, is very difficult. But when you start to get into these large systems games, whether you're a neo cloud or managed service provider or an enterprise, you got to start thinking about consequences. And if something happens over here, it's going to have an effect over here. Or I built an agent over here, it's got to talk to an agent inside or outside the company. Those are tough calls. So you have to really kind of get that data right. And so to me, I think what Snowflake has done is completely transformed their company. And if you think about Snowflake, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this because you were on the ground, but from watching the CUBE coverage that you had, it was clear that they clearly understand that they have an installed base customers running production analytics. Okay. And that's just the beginning. If you look at the Gen AI piece of it, all that analytics sector is going to bleed into or normalize into the rest of the business. And so that if you say, okay, if you believe that, then you have to then go to the next step, which is, what does that look like? And then the question then is that, okay, who's doing the work? Now, Databricks has taken a different approach. So they did the open table thing that would totally change the game. And then Snowflake responded, but then Databricks is going for the developer, more of the agentic AI builder, right? But it's interesting. They're not bad moves either way. They're a little bit different, than they are, but they're getting at the same thing. So the question is that it might be that Databricks and Snowflake isn't really competing.
No, they are. In
And
fact, you're bringing up a good point because it used to be, Snowflake is for the users that want simple, zero to Snowflake in 90 minutes. Databricks is for the harder core, data science, data engineering crowd, that are more sophisticated. And so what's happening is Snowflake is going after the Databricks base and getting more, sophisticated and somewhat more complicated. And despite its simplicity ethos, Databricks is making things much simpler from its, hardcore, down and dirty developer centricity. And they are definitely on a collision course. But I would say this, John, it's not just Snowflake and Databricks. They are, clearly competing against each other. But it's also the model makers are in there, versus the app guys, and so I would put Snowflake and Databricks. I would say they are now sort of competing with the likes of Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, Salesforce is in there, SAP, ServiceNow. They're all trying to sort of converge on the front end, how you talk to your data, not only the business users, but also the developers, and then how that connects to the back end, that system of intelligence. And you really, to dominate in this next era, you're going to need both. Otherwise, you're just going to be a feeder and you're going to get, I don't want to say democratized, but you're not going to be able to get as much value out of your clients as if you own that system of intelligence.
yeah. And what's your take now on the status between the competitiveness between the two companies? What is it? Is it head to head? Is there still kind of differentiation between the two? How would you classify how they're posturing and what's changed the most?
Well, it's so interesting. It was, as you know, the overlap between Snowflake and Databricks in accounts is very high. And it'd be interesting to see to what extent that continues as we're now shifting. There's a tectonic shift going on where people are going to have to make bets on what that front end looks like and what that back end looks like, and whether or not they standardize. I think they are going to have to ultimately standardize that. I'll say this about Snowflake: 2 or 3 years ago, their vision was to be the app store for data apps, and that's evolved. They really want to become the full system of intelligence at the back end, and they want to be sort of that front end participant as well. I think 2 or 3 years ago, they were thinking that the ecosystem would sorry, I'm losing my mic here, that the ecosystem would play that role, that they would enable that ecosystem to develop app, but they are leaning in heavily now. I think the other thing I would say is, Databricks threw a curveball at them when it bought Tabular and said, okay, we're gonna buy the company that created Iceberg. And I would say Snowflake, was kind of caught off guard there, but they have done a fantastic job of driving the Polaris sort of community and Horizon toward open table formats. They've completely embraced open table formats. It's like a 180 on that front. I'd say the other thing is they were nowhere. I would actually say that 3 years ago, they were nowhere. They weren't even in the conversation around AI. In fact, I think you remember in our super cloud, the guy, one of the CISO, I think, said, yeah, ML, that's the AI, that's kind of a big hypey thing. We don't really do that much at Snowflake. And then they've done a 180 on that front where they've really
but Dave, the context to that was that he's a CISO and they weren't, and no one was touching AI. There was not even agentic.
Of course,
it was just like
it wasn't on the radar. But the Databricks would have given you a different answer. They would have said, yeah, no, we're extensively, in AI. And so Snowflake kind of came out of nowhere in that whole thing. So it's a complete transformation that's driven by Ramaswamy. And I'll share this with you. We, in the analyst session, George and I both asked questions, trying to get to what their vision is and what the future is. And George basically laid out, he said, look, you got the LLM guys, you got the SaaS players, and you got Snowflake and Databricks all kind of going after that front end and back end. Who's going to win? How do you predict that? And Ramaswamy said, it's a very insightful comment and question that you're asking. But I got to tell you, the answer is we don't know the answer to that yet. But then he said, but I will tell you this, whoever wins it is going to look back and then rewrite history like they knew it was going to happen this way the whole time. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And then he said something that was really profound. And it was an homage to Frank Slootman. He said, product market fit is a life force. So that's our first principle. We will focus on product and innovation. And if we do that and stay close to customers,
Yeah.
that's our philosophy, that's our belief. And, we'll figure it out through that innovation. I think Benioff would say something similar, coming at it from his angle, but I like that because he's right and he's honest. Nobody knows how that's all going to play out. Stuff changes so quickly. You just got to keep focusing on the innovation and make bets fast. And if you make the wrong bet, you got to pivot quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I do appreciate the fact that's a great point. Snowflake CEO is very transparent. He's like a lot like Arvin at IBM, very direct. NVIDIA CEO, same thing. And Jensen's the same way, although Jensen does play, a little bit of he's got that same rap. He pumps people up because he knows, he just says quantum stocks up. Anything Jensen says, the category goes up. So he's got so much influence because they're executing so well, NVIDIA. And what caught me on my trip out to Cisco Lives was similar to your insights, Dave, in that when I wrote a post on this and flew
Can I
out
just,
to.
sorry, I'm sorry, before you get off Snowflake, can I just make one comment about Snowflake v. Databricks? Sridhar, great respect for Sridhar, technical visionary. He does not have the cachet, the gravitas of Ali Ghodsi. And that's who he is. His keynotes, he's up there, he's very deliberate. Ali, the week after next, first of all, he's also a visionary. Even if Ali Ghodsi were full of shit, you would buy from him. But he's not full of shit because Ali knows what he's talking about. And so he combined his vision. He's often very right, and he's just an incredible presence. And so that is a huge difference in the persona of each company, but they're both very, very credible. I just wanted to share that.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I will just add to that because I always talk about this all the time. If I had to compare being from the Bay Area 26 years, but now in New York, people ask me about this all the time. I go, here's how I would explain Snowflake versus Databricks. Stanford, Berkeley. Okay, so Berkeley is Godsey. Stanford is Snowflake. Now, although it's not they're all not necessarily from Stanford per se, but the Databricks' DNA is from University of California, Berkeley. Okay, and so the heritage there is revolutionaries, bomb throwers, protesting, and they take chances. They have an amazing deep bench of talent, and they do stuff. They make shit happen. All the major revolutions, internet, IP protocol, open source, BSD, which is now basically Linux. That's the DNA of Linux. All those came out of Cal. Streaming, Sun Microsystems also came from a little bit of Stanford. So Stanford and Berkeley have a great rivalry. In fact, they call their football game the big game because it's, and people who have, husband and wives who went to Stanford and Cal have flags that call the house divided. It's a flag of two colors. But the schools are different, right? Stanford is very intellectual, very smart. And a lot of great stuff comes out of Stanford too, but Berkeley's a little bit more edgier, right? You have to compare them. So that Godsey is very edgy, and he's really not a BSer. Okay, he can shoot the bull, as they say, and kind of like spin the story but it's grounded in knowledge. Sridhar's the same way. He's kind of like the quiet type, gets A's on his tests, and he's just smart, and they have a great team. Both companies have an amazing talent pool. So, so that's how I describe the cultures. And those are my words. No one else.
That's great. That was a good summary. I love that.
They won't say that. But the other thing is when you look at like their market position, Snowflake started out as a big lead, as you know. So they have more enterprise customers. Okay. They just ran the table. And, we talk with a lot of their customers. They have every single major enterprise. Databricks started taking territory, as you covered many times, on the overlap. So yeah, they got some revenue there, but then Databricks did very well with the neoclouds and all the large AI infrastructure business, as well as being in the ecosystems of AWS. So, different growth strategies as they both grew to escape velocity, but now they're at a maturation of the next chapters. And that's why I asked you the question, because I see that they can win both because the rising tide is so big. There's so much territory. I don't think it's going to be squabbling as much as it is like who's just got the more durable position. So what I'm looking for is where's the durability when you take the cyclical trend out. because that's going to
Well,
be the big stock price. If I was a stock picker, I'd be like, okay, when all the bloom is off the rose on the AI infrastructure build out, whatever year you think that's going to slow down or not be as explosive, 24 months, maybe 3 years. Some say 1 year. I say 2 years. Personally, I think it's going to be at minimum 2 more years of massive build out. When that's over, there better be the barbell strategy. You better have another side. And that's why I like Broadcom. I've always said this. Broadcom's got VMware and they got a software portfolio. And so, Hock Tan has done that. They got the chip growth and they got the barbell on the other side with VMware.
well, you better have apps too, John. You
Yeah,
better have apps
yeah.
on top 2 years down the road.
So I think Snowflake's got a very durable business on the enterprise. And I think they just got flat-footed over the past 6 years on, milking that dry until they had to get focused. And they have been for a couple of years. Again, we've been covering that like a blanket. You and George Gilbert nailing that
Well,
landscape.
and your comment about Databricks, being private, I mean, they've surpassed Snowflake in terms of revenue. They're growing at like almost twice the rate. They've got a higher valuation. Their valuation prior to today was like, 135 billion. Snowflake was just kind of hovering just under 100 billion. And so, but I would say this, Matt Carroll, who's the CEO of Amuta, he was here in our studio. I remember we were doing the rebuild of our office in this studio. It was like 2018, I want to say. And he came in and he said, there's this new, I'm sensing there's this new stack emerging in the cloud. It's AWS, Databricks, and Snowflake coming together, which is kind of funny. And it was true. They were sort of partners and they were bringing out this new software stack. And then all of a sudden, I think, Slootman and Al, at the time was CEO, and Ali Goetze was like, hey, wait a minute, let's go for the big prize. They're both competing and they see the opportunity here. It was like 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
And boy, oh boy, they are now like going at it hard. And I think they both got durable businesses, but Databricks staying private. So who knows? I mean, what the metrics really look like. Remember how long it took Cloudera to go public. So I hope they go public sooner rather than later. But
maybe they'll stay private long enough where the blockchain infrastructure can just tokenize the equity and they don't have to go public.
anyway, let's get to Cisco. What'd you learn at Cisco Live? So psyched you went.
Well, I mean, the thing of the AI is redefining the network at both ends. That's the big takeaway. For better part of multiple decades, networking was the plumbing. Profitable but largely invisible. Then the center of gravity really shifted upward to the cloud platforms. We covered that wave and the SaaS apps, and increasingly software-defined architectures. Virtualization grew and became more with containers, Kubernetes, and now you're seeing with generative AI, it's changing everything. The artificial intelligence changes the equation, and so we're having what I call an IT moment. An IT, information technology. In fact, it was referenced in the Cisco keynote, the book by Nick Carr that you always quoted in the early days of theCUBE. Does IT matter? And it matters more. And the AMD executive quoted that. His CISO CIO for AMD mentioned that. But the cleanest way to frame this, Dave, is that the network AI is redefining what networking is, right? Because if you look at NVIDIA's success, their growth and a lot of growth in networking, but there's no Cisco in there. There's no Cisco in the AI factory. It's basically NICs that are made to using copper to connect the switches to keep the GPU racks and the scale up working, meaning the system's running. But copper and optical have different transmission methods, electricity and light. So you're seeing leakage, and we're getting down into the weeds, but there's an opportunity.
Yeah, educate me on this. I'm not really an optics guy, but tell me more.
You can only have X number of GPUs on a rack. So when Dell puts the picture of their rack and everyone puts their big rack photos of the servers, and NVIDIA puts them out there. If you look at the density of what's on the rack, the switches take up most of the rack. And that's a huge deal. So if you can take those NICs out, and those NICs are in there, those network interface cards are switching components. Its entire purpose is to use copper, which is great for short distance,
and cheaper.
So, but you can only limit how many NICs you have or switches that constrains the number of GPUs. And so they use what they call co-packaged optics, CPO. That's like chips that have an interface. Broadcom has it. Arista has it. Social AI had it sold to Marvell for $5 billion. And so
Cisco, yeah.
Cisco has it. But the real factor is that energy leaks when you convert electricity to optics. And you have, picojoules per bit kind of analysis. It's a new metric that's going to come out. This is where I think Cisco could win, because if they can connect AI factories like they used to connect campuses, they could get back into the switching game with new products. So I think, their Silicon One strategy, and Chuck Robbins was asked, what are you guys betting on? He said silicon. Didn't even hesitate. Boom, silicon.
You
So I
remember
think,
you and I went to that announcement. It was like 4 years ago when they made that bet. Remember?
yeah.
In San
And
Francisco?
yeah, and so it's happening. It's what's really going on is that the AI factory wave that was, created by NVIDIA, Dell, and our commentary around that has created a new networking architecture, because you got to have high performance networking, just like why, Micron stock is up, because high bandwidth memory's up. The storage guys are getting a reboot. So everything's got to be redesigned around the system. So high performance memory, high performance storage, but there's no high performance networking. NVIDIA owns the GPU category, but who owns networking? It's an open, nobody. So Cisco really could nail this, because they have optical. They've been doing this. So, IF factories require, just name a few things: high performance networking, optical interconnects, security, observability, data movement, operational control planes, and life cycle management. This is Cisco core competency. So, the network is no longer connecting computers and campuses. It's just connecting. It is a computer. Remember Scott Neely? You commented on my LinkedIn thread.
Yeah.
Network is the computer. So
I
Cisco
should have
had.
called it cloud, he said.
She had called it. Well, now it's NeoCloud. So this wave is a cyclical wave with massive money being built out, and NVIDIA and others are making money, and Cisco's not getting their share. They should get more, in my opinion. So I had a big sit down with the senior people on this, because if they can nail the scale up and get more capabilities, then you can deploy them into smaller footprints and make the bigger racks bigger and better. So I think that's going to be a big thing. The rest of the stuff was Cisco doing G2 Patel's product plan, which is to unify everything, and they showed great stuff. They showed great security in their the security live piece that they had, and Splunk acquisition has a data fabric, so they got great recurring revenue. They got the barbell strategy going on, so that's why their stock was up, because it's not a hardware refresh cycle for Cisco. It's a completely new market opportunity, and they got recurring revenue, and they got the hyperscaler NeoCloud build out on two sides of that barbell, and then the edge with the service providers and the telcos hasn't come online yet. So, I mean, they are looking at massive growth. If you look at Cisco, they got the recurring revenue, and they got the cyclical trend as their friend. And I think that's going to be a secret sauce for Cisco if they don't screw it up. So they can screw it up by having a bad architecture. They can screw it up by being an also ran. So, but if they can nail the switch for factories, it's just the whole premise of what Cisco was built on, connecting networks together. So connect factories, connect distributed computing nodes, whatever you want to call it. That changes their story, and it's a new Cisco. I mean, it's a brand new company. If this goes that next level, it's a buy for sure, in my opinion.
Well,
of course, we don't give financial advice, but I would definitely, love Cisco on this if they can get that, that piece of the stack nailed. And
so
no one's talking about it, because NVIDIA doesn't want to talk about this, Dave.
well, NVIDIA talks about networking though, John.
No, they don't want to talk about the fact that they have a flawed scale up architecture with AI factories.
Just like they didn't want to talk about
NVIDIA has a flawed scale-up architecture. So let that sit for a second. No one has ever criticized NVIDIA. I'm not criticizing because they know this. They told me this. So, this is what's happening. And that's just evolution. It's not their fault. It's not that they're doing their best. Their stuff is great, but they're not getting the best energy out of the racks. They're not scaling up as fast. So I think it's going to be a huge opportunity. And whoever nails that optical will win NVIDIA. NVIDIA needs this piece of the puzzle bad.
But just to quantify things, NVIDIA claims, and I believe it's correct, that it's the largest networking company in the world in revenue terms. It's got over $30 billion in annualized revenue for networking. Now, Cisco's a $50 billion company, but half its revenue comes from other stuff. software, services, compute. So, NVIDIA has surpassed Cisco, which is insane to think about it
Yeah.
in terms of networking revenue. How can that be? They bought Mellanox. Well, InfiniBand, isn't InfiniBand dead? Well, they don't even do Ethernet. Well, oh yeah, they do Ethernet. They do their own sort of custom Ethernet designed for AI. So, they'll eventually get this right, but
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
interesting.
it's funny. No one's talking about InfiniBand, Dave. That's exactly why this is so awesome. We used to be, they had nothing to talk about, so they would debate InfiniBand versus Ethernet. That's gone. So the competitive landscape is becoming very clear in the semiconductor business. And although the stocks got killed today, again, this week is bad. Micron's down, AMD's down, NVIDIA's down. Everyone's down pretty big. But the landscape's clear. NVIDIA owns the AI compute narrative. Okay, everyone's recognizing NVIDIA. Broadcom dominates the merchant silicon discussions, and they got killed, and their numbers were great. Now I think they don't want to tip their hand on what's coming. In my opinion, that's my conspiracy theory. But I think they're going to continue to thunder away. Cisco is trying to reposition Silicon One as a converged architecture spanning the routing and switching layers, which is going under a massive reset because of co-packaged optics and photonics fabrics. So this is a hot area. So if you're an investor, look at optics, photonics, co-packaged optics. Look at what NVIDIA is doing. Look what AMD is doing. And so no one knows the networking, who's going to win the networking game. Right now, NVIDIA could win the compute and the networking, but Cisco partners with NVIDIA, but yet they sell switches. So it's going to be very interesting dance on Cisco's side on how they want to handle that. And I think Silicon One could be a nice slide in to NVIDIA and have a converged architecture while supporting NVIDIA's mission. If that happens, this thing's going to skyrocket because if they don't do that, I think they'll have problems. They won't have problems. They'll just won't have the growth. But the problem to solve is energy in the scale up, better energy, more GPUs, more computing, and scale up, scale out, scale across. Scale across is easy. That's Optical's great for that. But in the rack itself, copper is the choice. Why? Because you can use it, but you can't use it with more than X number of GPUs, depending upon how many switches you have. that's the little math, right? Like how many switches? Great. Based upon these switches, I can do I can connect these GPUs with copper. But remember, you're hopping across NICs, Dave, so latency kicks in. That's why KV cache is so great. So this is like a big inside the weeds, but this is a strategic significance
Well, is it
beyond.
not, is the mantra not use optics when necessary, but no more? I mean, do you see that changing? I mean, that's sort of always been the bromide is, an homage to Einstein.
We've never had these mega cycles like we're in now. We're in a super cycle. Look at the SpaceX IPO. We've never seen this kind of computing architecture before.
Right,
What NVIDIA
but
has
you're
done
saying,
is,
but it's still, but you still want to use copper where you can,
yeah, but
right?
I mean,
Because
if you're going to have all this density, if you can go, pure optics and photonics, why not?
it's too expensive.
Well, it gets smaller, faster, cheaper.
Well, that's what I'm asking you. Is there a crossover coming? Are you saying that
Yeah.
optics will be less expensive at some point? I guess it's a function of volume, right?
Well, if you have GPUs that are idle, okay, that's an expense. So NVIDIA doesn't want GPUs to be idle. That's why Dell AI factories are kicking ass because the way they design the rack scale systems, essentially, it's one rack. We talked about this on our last podcast. They can engineer it, build it to order to maximize the components and the system architecture like it's a single server of some sort, like the old days, but it's a rack and it's got millions and millions of dollars of gear in it. And so they're going to I think they're going to make it better and faster. And you're going to see things like optics emerge where it gets smaller and cheaper because the ROI on that's going to be better. Because if you have a scale up rack and you can get more GPUs with the energy and you can feed it out of real-time memory and storage, and that's what NVIDIA's been doing. The one little missing piece of the puzzle is this electrical component where copper fails. Copper works today because you put switches in. Well, guess what? There's too many switches. So you're constrained on CPU. So, okay, take out some switches. How do you do that without losing performance? Optical. And that's the photonics piece. So, I got a big research report coming on this, and it's, things just reach their practical limits. And copper's great because in the old days, you could use it. And so, of course, they're using it now. But then you're like, okay, can we get more? And that's why Celestial AI sold to Marvell. That's why photonics is super popular. And Schull, who was the president of Arista, he's got some action going on. He's already raised almost $500 million in funding in his company. I'm sure Arista's thinking about this. Um, it's an engineering
So,
game, so we'll see. I mean, today it's just make the solve the problem, but could photonics be standard? That I don't know. That's a guess, but I would say if it's faster and I get more horsepower out of it, it'll go there.
so what I'm reading is the economics of copper are breaking, to your point. Um,
No,
and
the distance is breaking,
yeah,
and that's constraining
right,
the.
but it's also affecting the economics. It's already cheaper. It's the electronics at both ends. So the crossover is actually happening as we speak, which is kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Um, uh, because you got really thick shielding that you need, you got expensive digital signal DSP chips that you need,
It
you
just
got
causes more
your
delay.
power
So
budget.
the more switching you're doing and hopping across NICs to get to the GPUs and doing KV cache and all the things that are going on in that system architecture, it creates idle GPUs.
So the optical glass is already cheaper to produce than physical copper, but the timeline of the crossover entirely depends on the electronics and of course the transceivers to convert the signals.
Yeah.
And so it's 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 probably going to happen. It says in three phases. The 2026 is it's kind of happening now, and then the next phase is going to be sort of toward the end of the decade because you're going to have standard enterprises and local corporate offices sort of standardizing on optics, and then eventually the consumer electronics and home networks.
Yeah.
That's like early 2030s. This is kind of where copper kind of hangs on. The most price sensitivity, gaming consoles, smart TVs, et cetera. But then, when it's going to happen, it's going to be a TCO argument, and then that's going to drive volume, and then eventually it's going to cross over. Interesting.
Yeah.
Good call, John. This was not on my radar as much as it should have been.
Yeah. I mean, you're digging in the factory too, but there's so much going on. I'm seeing coming across both in Palo Alto and the events we're covering and NYSE because I can start to see where the money's going. And when Celestial AI sold to Marvell, I'm like, And then when remember Broadcom showed us their CPO package 3 years ago? Or was it 2 years ago? I forget when it
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
They pioneered co-packaged
At the
optics.
financial analyst meeting, yes.
Yeah, so it's just infrastructure's hot, Dave. I mean, it's engineering work to be done, and it's people who are working at Cisco, AMD, NVIDIA. These companies, they're all saying the same thing. It's the best time to be an engineer right now if you're in engineering systems. It's really killer, and we'll see more. I mean, we got a lot more going on. I'm going to be at FinOps next week and Linux Foundation. But the final thing, just kind of close out. The hottest topic this past 2 weeks for me has been tokenomics, which is a term used for people who are token maxing their budget. There is a massive problem. We even on our own company, people are like, where these $200 credit card bills come from?
Token maxing, not a good idea.
People are getting whacked. And CFOs are like, whoa. I mean, if you have like 1,000 employees, you're going to have a number. But if you get 10,000 employees and they're all hitting $200 a month for Anthropic and Claude, you're like, guess what that adds up to pretty quickly? Unforecasted budgeting. And then the question comes in, where's the value? So there's a little bit of a thing going on. Now, I think the answer NVIDIA and Dell and HPE know is you just buy an AI factory and put it on-prem and have unlimited tokens for free.
Manufacture your own tokens. Be a token factory.
Yeah, so I think NVIDIA's Taipei announcement and what Dell's been talking about, it's going to lead to the following. You want to do some projects, you want to do, swarming of agents, fleets of agents, play around, great. Keep it inside the enterprise. Here's your machine on your desk. Here's for your team. Here's the server in the closet or in the room or in the data center in the building that's secured. Go to town. Have fun. And when you get something, let's take it to the CFO and we'll scope out budget. And that's, to me, I think you're going to see a lot of that coming quickly because I do not think it's sustainable with the market right now, given the demand and the cost. This is what a bubble burst could look like, Dave, if it's not reined in. And I think it's not a bubble bursting fake head fake. I think it's just the excitement and the value is so good. The money's going to go right to solving it. And vendors
Well,
will come in, platforms will come in. It's not like it's fake. It's not like, whoa, this didn't happen. No, it's happening. That's why there's no bubble bursting. That's why my thesis is there's going to be evaluation culling or normalization, but there is no bubble bursting because there's all demand for it. It's not hypothetical. Remember, pets.com, when the .com bubble, guess what? People have food delivery and pet stock, they shop online all the time. It ended up happening. It just didn't happen in the bubble window. So here it's happening. So that this could cause a problem if it's not reined in. Token costs is a short-term issue. The worst issue is bad agents going rogue, security hacks. That's not a budget issue. That's a critical failure for the company that could go out of business. So I think
well, it's all about monetization. I mean, if you're going to be manufacturing intelligence via tokens, you got to figure out how you're going to actually get paid back from that. So if it costs you $1 to manufacture a token and you're making $2, $3, $4, $5, $10 on that token, then great, make as many as you can.
well, let's pick that up on the next podcast because I have a hard stop. It's 5:30 here on the East
And
Coast.
we had a 5 o'clock meeting we just blew off. So it's like, oh, well.
I declined that. Well, Dave, great chat.
All right, John.
We get the Databricks Summit coming up. We got FinOps, a lot of stuff going on. It's happening. We'll see you next time.
All right. See you later.
See ya.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.